Hey everyone, it's your host Brian here. Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Work Well podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our website, workwellpodcast.com, where you can access show notes for each episode and lots of other great content too. This podcast is brought to you with thanks to our partners, AJ Products and Irish Life Health. My guest today is Donal O'Donoghue. Donal is Managing Director at Sanderson Recruitment, and he's also the President of the National Recruitment Federation. Financial well-being, it's so fundamental for all of us. And given the uncertainty that's out there present, it was really great to get Donal's view on the jobs market and hear what a recovery in the economy might look like and the potential implications for individuals and employers. Let's dive straight into my conversation with Donal O'Donoghue. Donal O'Donoghue, hello and welcome to the Work Well podcast.
Hey, Brian.
How are you, Donal?
Yeah, all things considered, not too bad. Interesting and challenging times, tough times for a lot of people out there. So I suppose I'm like everybody else, just trying to readjust to work and the world of work, in this coronavirus environment.
And how are you managing that? How are you managing to balance your own work and home commitments at present?
I'd say it's a challenge. I'd say similar to everyone else, it's challenging. So I think one of the things that people have been talking about quite a lot is remote working. And to me, this isn't remote working. This is crisis management as opposed to remote working. You know, when you think about remote work, you think about having the time and opportunity to set up your home office or your remote office the way you would like it. You'd make the right provisions to deal with your family situation. I suppose like anyone else, we're doing the best we can on the fly to make things work. But I've had days where there's been working from the kitchen table with the kids, working through their schoolwork, calls ringing, challenges with broadband. Not so much for the Dublin people, I have to say, but some of our team that would be based remotely in some of the regions have had some challenges with their connectivity. But we've been encouraged overall. I guess my own background, I run a recruitment business called Sanderson, and we tend to place people at graduate level up to senior level in different organizations in marketing, finance, HR, procurement, and IT and business change. And I suppose we're fortunate that a lot of those roles can be delivered remotely. So the change for us has been a lot around helping employers to transition from interviewing in person to interviewing over one of the video platforms, and doing the onboarding and inductions and training of new hires that haven't stepped foot into the office. So the supply chain of actually getting kit, getting mobile phones and laptops out to new starters has been something that's been added into the recruiter's skill set, over the past 3 or 4 weeks. So challenges, but trying to do the best we can to survive and be positioned for when it all kind of comes back to some piece of normality.
Very good. And as well as being MD of Sanderson, you're also the President of the National Recruitment Federation. Is that impacted in a similar way to what you're doing with Sanderson?
So the National Recruitment Federation is the representative body for most of the recruitment companies and employment agencies around the country. So we've seen a huge variance there. So we've seen the businesses that are recruiting healthcare, clinicians and medical staff become incredibly busy and put together some campaigns to try to mobilize workers that are going to support the HSE call to action. We've also seen businesses that are recruiting in other sectors have their businesses more or less grind to a halt overnight and have to pretty much transition and adapt to try to see how they can reallocate their people or recruit for areas that are in demand. So We've seen a huge amount of jobs go, as everybody knows, overnight, but equally there's been some demand in other sectors, significant upswing in demand in the logistics, distribution, supply chain, quality, some of the food manufacturing businesses as well. So I suppose the National Recruitment Federation, similar to any organisation like that, is also trying to facilitate, and we're also trying to facilitate the internal staff in the NRF to work remotely and to be able to deliver for their members in this new way of working. So lots of challenges. Same for I think anyone that's business is still operating. They're just trying to navigate these waters.
So you're getting that role, you're getting great insights into a number of different industries. Is there, of course, we have government supports there, which are extremely helpful and beneficial to employers at the moment. Are you seeing any businesses that are facing challenges, that are doing anything kind of creative or innovative to support, keeping the doors open and retaining employees?
We're seeing a broad range of tools and services being used. So we've seen some businesses that have gone on to reduced hours, depending on workload. We've seen, if you look in the UK, for example, we've seen businesses implementing the government furloughed workers scheme there, where they're able to, if there isn't enough work for somebody, put them on furlough, where the government pays a percentage and then the organisation can top it up. It's somewhat similar to the scheme that we have in Ireland on the wage subsidy scheme. So we're seeing some companies taking that scheme up. I think it's been good that there's been more clarity raised around it recently, because some of the initial wording was probably a little bit confusing, where there was wording around the inability to pay wages and a 25% reduction in turnover. Initially, it sounded like a company was making a declaration of insolvency, whereas I think we've had clarification now that it's a self-declaration around the difficulty that the business is experiencing. So I think we're going to see more of an uptake of that initiative, and I welcome that as well, because I think anything that we can do to allow businesses to, even if we can just survive in the current market and be positioned for the upswing when it comes, I do think the upswing will be significant. Yeah,
fingers crossed for that. In advance of that, is there anything organizations, and I appreciate they're going through a bit of a flux at the moment, is there anything they can be doing at this moment in time now to prepare for getting back into the workplace, welcoming their employees back into the workplace?
Well, I'll give you what we're doing.
Yeah.
I think our initial focus when this came about is to try to use this as an opportunity. So we were fortunate that a number of our clients are continuing to hire and continuing to onboard permanent hires that are able to work remotely, and contract or interim staff that are able to work remotely. So we've been fortunate that probably 70% of our workload has remained, and 70% of the demand has remained. But that leaves 30% capacity. So what we've recently done, together with a number of different initiatives, is to invest in some additional learning and development tools. So we're trying to use the fact that people now have a bit more time to say, look, there's a learning platform available here. What are the areas that you want to upskill in? And it could be anything from, particular elements of the job or things outside work. We've tried to bring some wellness initiatives in, because I think now that we're just dealing with the commute down the stairs rather than the commute into towns and cities, there is that need to make sure that people are moving and people are getting fresh air and people are eating well. So we ran some small initiatives. Like, for example, we invested in that new learning platform, which is one that I think has been a really good investment. But then we ran some internal comms and some internal competitions where staff were having the opportunity to have competitions for most creative breakfast or healthy breakfast that they were making. They're kind of sharing between offices what different teams had done. And I suppose there's a few reasons for that. There's a bit of creativity, a bit of that competition between different teams and different offices. But also it's that engagement piece, because we're social animals, and when we are isolated, I think is when we can be at our most vulnerable. And the ability to keep our people talking to each other and engaged with each other, whether it's a phone call or a video chat, or just a Slack conversation, or a conversation over some kind of a internal competition like that, who makes the best breakfast or the healthiest breakfast. I think those little things are what are useful for keeping people engaged. And I think the value that sends to an organization, where you're able to say, look, this is a difficult time, business is going to decrease, but we want to invest in you, and we want you to invest some time in yourself. So when the situation improves, our team is there and they're ready to support their customers and do the best they can. And that it's almost been a time where people can take stock of themselves, can reboot, can look to improve or enhance their skill set that sometimes you don't have time to when you're stuck in the day-to-day job.
Yep, great points there. I love the that communication idea, that importance of continued communication, and there's a lot of fun communication in there. It's not all kind of work related stuff. The healthy breakfasts and fun breakfast sounds interesting, and something I'd recommend for others to do as well.
Yeah,
and
well, we like, if you think about the video platforms, that we start our week like many businesses or many teams would, with the team meeting around what are the objectives for the week. So that's now delivered over a video platform. But the other thing that was part of the culture at Sanderson was that on a Friday morning they had what we call the Sander Cafe, which is where people sat down, and the first 20 minutes of the day was taking time to reconnect with people. So they'd sit down at the canteen, they'd have a coffee and some pastries, and just spend 20 minutes to chat and to reconnect. And we realized that was something that people were really missing when we went to remote working.
Yeah.
So we retain that now over the video platform. So Sander Cafe on a Friday morning now happens over a web platform, and everybody still really enjoys it. So yeah. I think it's important to keep that kind of stuff up.
Absolutely. I've heard a few really nice examples of that, the virtual coffees, and I'm loving the examples I'm seeing from some senior leaders as well, where they're saying, yes, it's our kind of virtual cafe. It's the equivalent of the Sander Cafe, but kids, dogs, pets, they're going to be there. They're welcome as well. If they happen to pop in, it's no big deal. Like, it's showing a real human side to, I think, we're all in this together kind of idea.
Exactly. I think a few of my kids have joined in different meetings at different times, but it brings the element of what's important in life. I think we can all get really consumed by the day-to-day job and the pressures in terms of paying the bills and objectives that have to be achieved in work. And I think it's hard to find positives from the COVID-19 outbreak, but it's been somewhat of a reminder for us about what's important in life and how equal we all are. And there's been I think the interesting thing, so I'm talking to people that are in all sorts of different businesses, from marketing to sales to finance and IT, etc. And one of the interesting things I'm hearing from the sales people is that their prospects are now happier to take a call from them than ever before, that people are almost yearning for, maybe because they're at home and they're in the middle of a bit of chaos and not the normal work week, that they're so happy to take a call to talk about work or talk about different solutions or whatever else. So that's interesting as well.
Yeah. And you were mainly talking about your own team there, the investment in the learning and development tool. But I'm thinking about like some of the individuals now who'll be listening to this who may have been laid off or maybe facing an extremely uncertain couple of months ahead. Would that be similar advice for them? Maybe invest in some kind of learning and development, some kind of online training, and prepare in advance for the next couple of months.
Yeah, it's a really difficult time for a lot of people out there, and I think the COVID assistance payment, I welcome that gives some level of support to people, but for many people it's not going to be enough, particularly with rent prices in Dublin. I think what's been very interesting is the amount of rental properties that had probably been used for Airbnb over recent years that have now seemed to come onto the market. And I think that's something that I think at a policy level that will need to be looked at as we come out of this. But for people that have found themselves either temporarily laid off or out of work, I think you have to be practical. It'd be wrong to say, listen, it's a brilliant time to kind of go back to basics and to find out, how you'd like to redirect your career. For some people that have the ability to do that, or maybe are financially in a position to be able to do that, that's great. I think for others, it's about necessity at the moment. So what we've tried to do with the National Recruitment Federation is we launched a campaign called Keep Ireland Working, and we just tried to put a process in place for people that have found themselves laid off or else out of work, to be able to look at their core skill set, to see where that can transfer to in the market where jobs exist at the moment, which, for people that perhaps have worked in the airline sector or in hospitality or in the bar trade, or hairdressers, taxi drivers, any of the people that are now finding themselves in a very tough situation. I think you just need to have a level of practicality to try to say, look, there are some jobs out there. Can we transfer their skill set? If they need to do an online training course to be qualified, if they've had previously health and safety tickets or certificates that have now expired, we're trying to encourage those providers to provide that training online and to do it at no cost. And I've seen more and more of that happening recently. So I suppose the best advice for people that have found themselves in that situation is to try to reconnect with where there are opportunities, and to use your network. Like, everybody's in the same boat. There's no shame in finding yourself all of a sudden in a tough situation, and to connect with people and to reach out to, whether it's employers or recruitment companies or people in your network. I think it's just important to connect and to try to find whatever opportunities will get you through the next period of time.
Yep. And it's a very difficult question to ask, but what will the employment sector look like in a couple of months? You've mentioned a couple of times a bit of an upsurge. I mean, will that last though? Is that going to be like a bit of a surge, and then we'll return to almost recessionary times? I know it's impossible to say for sure, but what would your own thoughts be?
I think the answer to that is, it is difficult to say, and I think the answer to it is directly linked to how long the restrictions, if you want to call it the shutdown, lasts for. Because I think if you look at it economically, we were in a position where we were expecting between 3 or 4% growth in Ireland this year. Probably not as strong as the previous few years, but still a strong economic outlook. And then this health crisis has now kicked the economic crisis into action. So I think the shorter the crisis, the more rapid the upswing. Because the shorter the crisis, the more probability there is of businesses that are small owner-managed businesses, for example, or SME businesses that are operating month to month in terms of cash flow. Time is the biggest killer there, because you've got businesses burning cash. The businesses that are prudent, that are able to avail of some of the government assistance, so that the business survives, are the ones that will be able to hire again quickly, or to bring those people back into the organizations. I think it's a very steep drop in economic activity, and I expect a steep upswing. But I think the upswing is going to be directly connected to the length of this crisis. And I think we're in a fortunate position in Ireland, in that we've had good leadership that's responded quickly. I think the people of Ireland have really embraced what's been asked of them, and I think that's a positive thing. And when you look at what the clinicians are saying about trying to bring that R0 number down as low as possible, so infected people infect as few people as possible, and that trend line seems to be going in the right direction. So I think I'm optimistic, but I just, obviously there's an air of caution with that, just to be cognizant of the fact that so many people are in a really tough situation at the moment. But I think businesses are trying to do the best they can to survive, and then to be able to hire again as the market conditions improve.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, watch this space. But I agree with you 100%. I think the leadership has been really strong in this area, and I think as a country we can look back on that hopefully with pride in a few months' time. What will the recruitment industry look like in a few months' time? Another easy question for you there, but will things return to normal, in 6 months' time, or has recruitment changed now as a result of this new normal?
Well, I think what's interesting is that recruitment hasn't changed per se. I think recruitment had embraced a lot of the technologies in terms of interviewing by video platform, and having good GDPR compliant ways of dealing with personal data, and allowing people to work somewhat remotely. I think the recruitment sector would have been probably mid-market for embracing a lot of those things. But from my perspective, if I look at Sanderson as a business, having the freedom to work remotely would probably have been something that the more senior team members would have used, to occasionally work from their home office on a Friday. And you would have earned that kind of privilege over a number of years. But what we've seen, having everybody thrust into this situation of working remotely, is that productivity has been really good. And I think what's also interesting is that remote working, or the if you saw a candidate getting a new job and they said, oh, I've just secured a new position and I'm happy with the salary and I'm happy with the role and they're going to let me work from home a couple of days per week, it was almost like the holy grail for a while, that it was an extra soft benefit. What I found really interesting over the last few weeks in talking to my own team is that they're just dying to get back into the office to see each other and have that that ability to bounce off each other and share ideas and connect and communicate. And I think as an employer, I feel very heartened that I know that, should a situation like this arise again, or should somebody need a bit of flexibility to work remotely, that the productivity and that old school mentality of I have to see you at your desk to know you're doing your work, like that's a thing of the past, and that we as employers need to concentrate on measuring output and measuring outcomes and be good at working with our people to set and agree objectives, and then it's about the objective being delivered rather than time at the desk, and I think that's been a very positive thing. But will recruitment change? I think the sector will see some consolidation. I think, unfortunately, some of the smaller players or businesses that might have set up over recent years, some of them won't survive the drop in business. Their cash flows are going to be obviously very negatively impacted. So I think we'll see some bit of consolidation, and that can often be a positive for some of the more established businesses, because the businesses who are able to retain their people, I mean, the recruitment industry is an interesting one. Your assets effectively walk out the door at 5:30 or 6 p.m. Every evening. So as a business, it's all about being able to attract and retain really good people as recruitment consultants. So the businesses that are able to retain their people and develop them through this really difficult times, I think, are the ones that we're going to see do really well when some normality returns to the market. And I think for the businesses that are casualties of this coronavirus, I think we'll see a lot of those come back again, maybe in a different form. And like anything, any failure or any challenge in that way will only play to their advantage in the future. Like, your success is often directly linked to the tough times you've had to overcome, and it's certainly a tough time for a lot of businesses, but I'm sure many of them will bounce back even stronger.
Interesting what you're saying there about productivity. I think we'll probably find quite a few almost case studies, if you like, from organizations that have been working remotely, and it'd be interesting to see if their productivity levels were similar or even better. I'm a big fan of the kind of results only work environment, and I was only writing about it there recently. I have a feeling now we'll see a lot more of these kind of environments being embraced in the workplace now, because well, currently we're almost been forced into that. It's more about the output, as you mentioned, rather than a bum on a seat from 9 to 5, a visible bum on a seat. So it'll be interesting to see if some organizations continue with that approach, or whether they just revert back to the normal. But I think we'll have a few interesting case studies to review anyway once all this settles down.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting when you think about it, one of the things that often constrained business growth was access to accommodation or access to office space.
Yeah.
And I think just one of the positives that should come out of this crisis is that, if you have an office that has desk space for 20 or 30 people, and you have a lot of demand during busy times, and you'd like to be able to grow your headcount, for example, to 40 or 50 people, there's a good ability to look at your occupancy and look at some remote working to say, look, with hot desking, do you need how many desks do you need, according to your headcount, and rather than being constrained by it, actually use it as an opportunity to grow without incurring the extra costs of taking on more property leases or acquiring any premises. So I think these are the things in terms of, we've talked a lot about the downturn or the crisis. Potentially being a catalyst for the revitalization of rural Ireland and creating this kind of remote working revolution, if you like. And I think there's an element to that, provided we've got the infrastructure and broadband. The delivery of that national broadband is vitally important. We just this morning did some speed tests around the country, and the variance between upload and download speed from town to town, city to city is huge. Right. So that's a key thing. But if that can be a positive that comes out of this, and if businesses are able to grow without being constrained to having exactly the number of desk spaces or office space for each employee, that's another positive that can come from it, and also leading to that output driven culture, as opposed to I'm a victim of it myself, of liking to see who's there and who's working and who's in early and who's putting the work in, but it's an outdated way of looking at things. So we're all on a bit of a journey to bring our thinking up to scratch, and hopefully that's another positive that can come from this.
Absolutely, yeah. So quite a few positives, I think. And that's a nice way to finish up, Donal. You've been very generous with your time. If for anyone listening in, where can they go to find out more about you, about Sanderson, and about the National Recruitment Federation?
Yeah, so you find the National Recruitment Federation, which is the body for recruitment companies, at nrf.ie. And for anybody that's interested in learning more about Sanderson, we are at sanderson.ie. And people can find me on Twitter, Donal O'Donoghue _ and or on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with people if I can be of some help to anyone.
Fantastic. Listen, Donal, thanks again for your time. Stay safe, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Brian.